Hello, I'm George Monger, CEO of Connect Music, and I'm here with Conversations with CEOs, and I'm fortunate to have Jessica Taveau, CEO of Epicenter Memphis. Welcome to Conversations with CEOs. It's a joy to have you here, and it's even cooler that we're going to talk today about entrepreneurship from a company that incubated in Epicenter.
I love it.
So to get started, tell us a little bit about you, and then let's talk about Epicenter.
Sure. So Jessica Taveau, President CEO of Epicenter. We're a nonprofit entrepreneurship hub, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I grew up in Memphis, native Memphian, went to public school here and left for a while, went outside the market to college and worked in a few other cities, mostly in PR and marketing. So I have a communications background. And about 11 years ago, moved back with my family. My family is still here, my parents and my brother. And so, moved back and started working in economic development. So first at another organization where we incubated Epicenter. And about a couple years in, we spun that organization out as a separate 501c3. And I went with the spin out and helped brand it and launch it. And about 2 years ago, became the interim CEO when my predecessor left for a great opportunity, and then became permanent CEO about a year ago.
Well, congratulations on that. I was one of those early startups that was in the space and advocating that you were a fantastic leader, and so hats off to you for dropping interim and having that permanent role now.
Well, thank you. We were glad that Connect Music was in our space, and so excited to see you grow here in this new space.
Well, we are excited, and so you kind of share with us how Epicenter was born. And so if anyone visits epicentermemphis.org, you get to the website, and boldly right at the beginning of the website, it says, "We are building a just and inclusive network for entrepreneurs." Can you speak to the initiatives and emphasis that Epicenter has on diverse founders and the intent around a majority minority city like Memphis?
Absolutely. So like you said, Epicenter started as an idea with actually our local chamber, so Greater Memphis Chamber. They have a chairman's circle, which is a group of business leaders here in Memphis that really have bold and audacious plans and ideas for how Memphis can grow. One of those ideas was around entrepreneurship. So over a number of years, there had been really strong organizations that had built entrepreneurial programs, supported startups and raised capital, but these organizations were sort of doing it on their own and sort of working alongside each other. And so Epicenter was really created to bring those activities together under a common strategy to really strengthen the ecosystem and build out a true entrepreneurial ecosystem, to pilot new programs, to bring additional resources into the market. And really the center of that, and really what you mentioned, is making sure that our entrepreneurial ecosystem represents the demographics of Memphis. So represents a majority Black city, that those, our outreach and our communications and intent is to certainly be the front door for all entrepreneurs in Memphis and Shelby County, but there's an emphasis on ensuring that our entrepreneurial community mirrors our community widely.
Well, and as a hub for entrepreneurship, you have two locations, right? So, or programming across the area. And just for those that are joining us, we're talking local, and of course, Conversations with CEOs is designed to have conversations with all sectors, including nonprofit. But I thought that this was an interesting interview and opportunity for us because it's nonprofit that's driving for-profit wealth building opportunities through entrepreneurship. And so part of that is Memphis is a 60% Black city, has a tremendous poverty problem. And one way from the chairman's circle from those moon missions was a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we can create 10,000, I believe is the number, entrepreneurs over the next, was it 10 years or 1,000 entrepreneurs?
1,000, yes.
1,000 over. All right, I was like, all right.
We'll get there. I like big goals, so 10,000's fine.
Yeah, so 1,000 entrepreneurs. And I remember being at the chamber, I want to say that was under John Moore's leadership when that goal was kind of set out with the chairman's circle. And one of the things I remember sitting in that annual chairman's lunch and thinking, well, what is that going to look like? And through the work that Epicenter is doing, it is probably more diverse than I've seen our business community look, the investments, the women, the men and women of color, Latinx, Black. I was fascinated with starting even Connect. But what I noticed is you have your core business in the core of downtown Memphis, which is important. We've got great law firms in downtown.
Yeah.
Some of our most important businesses have headquarters in downtown. Then you have the Frayser component. Can you kind of share a little bit about that, the demographics of the community? What's the goal in the area?
Sure. Yes, we have our headquarters. We moved our headquarters from Cooper Young, which is a midtown historic neighborhood. We were at a great location there, pre-pandemic, and we had really outgrown the space, and we're looking for some new space during 2020, 2021, which was a little, I'll call it forward thinking instead of calling it crazy. But we're glad that, folks like you came with us and ended up in our downtown location. But we moved from Midtown into downtown. There's, as you said, a lot of development down there. It's really, again, it allows us to be a front door and have visibility to local entrepreneurs and those who are visiting, and really connect entrepreneurship more broadly to regional economic development activities, which I think we've done a good job of over the last 5 years. But it's important that we don't expect everyone in Memphis and Shelby County to come to us downtown. I mean, there's a natural, there could be barriers to that for some of our citizens. Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's important for us to make sure that we're taking services and investment into our neighborhoods and around Shelby County. And so one of those, the ways that we do that is through Frayser Connect. Okay. So Frayser is, a really vibrant community, a historic community. It has had a lot of foundational investment and activity in it to date. But we thought there was a way with a partner to really expand entrepreneurial access there. So we've partnered with Frayser CDC, so the Community Development Corporation there, which is a trusted partner in the community, which knows the community and knows its citizens and knows the citizens' needs and desires. And we've partnered with Frayser CDC and Rise Memphis, which is financial literacy, to really embed entrepreneurial resources in Frayser with a trusted partner. And so we work all together to figure out, what do Frayser businesses want? What do they need? What resource gaps are there? Are there entrepreneurs who want to start businesses? What kinds of businesses do they want to start? What does that mean from a resource perspective? And then there's a capital component, of course. And so, and we'll talk about capital, I think, in a little bit. But coming into a neighborhood with resources and no capital, I think, would be a missed opportunity. And so there's a micro grant component to that. And let me say too that the entire Frayser Connect initiative is funded by Mass Mutual Foundation, which has a long and trusted history in the neighborhood. And so we're 2 years in. We've seen businesses grow. We've seen businesses rent space in Frayser and establish businesses there. There's a driving business that's expanding and scaling. There's food-based businesses that are so representative of the community there, and even some tech-based businesses that are, I think, bubbling up. And so really figuring out what's there and what the needs of the community are, and taking resources that are desired by the community into the community with a partner. We'd like to see more of that over the next few years.
Well, and one of the things you touched on is capital, and excited to have that conversation. But you talked micro grants, and before we go on, I just want to applaud the Mass Mutual Foundation. We have to have corporate responsible organizations that are doing the work that allow us to bridge the wealth gap in communities, particularly in communities of color. If you look at most of the statistics, there's a tremendous gap between white American and black American families. And so these types of programs like Frayser Connect, I think, serve a real opportunity for us to improve and close that gap. And so hats off to partners there at Mass Mutual Foundation and the work that Epicenter is doing in Frayser. And to that point, I think when there's a trend, there's a tide that's turning as we talk about ownership in hip hop culture. In Black culture, we talk about, we're a music company, right? So when we talk about music, we talk about owning the sound recording or the master recording and owning your publishing and such. And so many times during that conversation, one of the things that quickly becomes the important piece is you can own 100% of something, but if it has no economic value, it doesn't do any good for you. So when we start thinking, the next piece is how do you build capital? Access to capital, in my own experience. I was talking to a dear friend, and I said to her, hey, I'm looking to raise $600,000. And she said, oh, well, that's a friends and family round. You can get that from your uncle. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting on the phone thinking, if I called my uncle about 6 cents, I'd probably have to make 2 phone calls, right? And so one of the things you mentioned was micro grants. Can you share with our audience here, what's a micro grant? How does that compare? I want to then talk about non-dilutive equity,
right.
i.e. the family and friends round, and I want to share my own story with you about that.
Sure. Well, I can talk a little bit about sort of the capital stack that I think we've tried to put together.
Let's define capital stack.
Yeah, so capital stack, really how we define that, and I think I want to be careful about capital terminology and just making sure that I'm using the right words. But we have capital 101 and things like that. But for folks to learn more, but the capital stack, how we define that is a continuum of capital products that are available and accessible and easily understood to our community at different stages of your business and depending on what kind of business you are. So, you mentioned non-dilutive capital versus venture capital versus debt capital. I think, depending on what kind of business you are, what age and stage of business you are, you're going to be looking at different capital products. And that is really, capital and access to capital is our number one request, our sort of stickiest subject, the thing that we've tried to demystify the most with our portfolio, and we continuously have a lot of work to do in that area, and that's on us to take on. And so you mentioned, I'll talk about a couple examples. Sure. So in that capital stack, so you talked about friends and family round, right. And a lot of us wouldn't be able to, call a friend or family member and ask for that kind of funding.
$600,000, uncle.
Right, sure.
Send it to my bank account.
Sure, yeah. So Epicenter actually created a friends and family fund. So recognizing that there are those in our community who aren't able to make that phone call for whatever reason, and that may be underserved in that area, we created Epicenter can be your friends and family. And so we have a capital officer who helps navigate that process. And when an entrepreneur comes to us and has really tapped out of their own resources, maybe there's a piece of equipment or a product or service that's needed to move to the next stage or to meet a milestone, then that friends and family fund can come in. Last year, I think we deployed, we just ran the numbers, about $200,000 in friends and family funding in our community. Of course, the vast majority of those entrepreneurs were Black or people of color, and a majority women as well. And so, the Friends and Family Fund, I think, is a key piece of that capital stack. We work with CDFIs, Community Financial...
Community Development Financial Institutions.
Yeah, development financial institutions.
I was Googling that.
Yeah, okay. I got my letters mixed up there. But we work with CDFIs to deploy capital as well. Pathway Lending is one of those funders that have offices in Memphis, but there's a whole CDFI network in Memphis that we work with to ensure that the funding that they have gets deployed into the entrepreneurial community. On the venture side, we have what's called a formation fund, which is a fund that is evergreen. So any returns that Epicenter manages the fund, any returns that we get go back into the fund. Okay. So that's early stage venture capital that we're able to de-risk other investments. So maybe early stage entrepreneurs need an initial check, a first dollar in to help de-risk for other investors. And we actually just had an exit event from a startup that went through one of our accelerator programs 5 years ago. They got acquired. And so that the returns from that went back into the fund. And so
awesome.
that's
Well,
for the next,
congratulations to the fund
thanks.
for that, because that money's recycled.
It is, and it doesn't come to Epicenter, it goes back into the community.
That's awesome.
And so, I think there are, capital products along the way and services that we hope meet the needs of the community and the age and stage of business. And we've tried to demystify that process. Again, I mentioned Capital 101.
Right.
We have a couple of technical assistance workshops that sort of define terms and help demystify, what should I even be looking for? What kind of capital should I be going? What makes sense for my business right now? And again, we have a capital officer on staff that helps folks navigate that process.
Well, in my own experience, and so for everybody joining us, when I started Normac, or Connect, the parent company's Normac, when I started the business, had strong relationships in the media entertainment space, had a little bit of capital to start with and began to build the business. By the time I knew that, all right, this is something that I think is significantly scalable, there's a transition around music not just being something that we consume, but it being an asset class that at the time we were seeing massive billions of dollars coming in from institutional investors into music and creative works. And one of the challenges that I had was we needed to do some customized development around a product. And so that product was going to cost us, I think it was $15,000 or $17,000. And through conversations with the capital officer, well, wait a minute, we've got this non-dilutive fund. Have you earned revenue? Yes, we've earned revenue. Here's the revenue to date. Here's what we're looking to do. Well, that critical piece of intellectual property that we were building with that, I think helped us grow revenue more. And to your point of kind of moving through that continuum, you have that initial capital that sits alongside our early, bootstrap budget. From that, we were able to prove the product a little bit more, and then start to have that $1 conversation with Formation Fund, and start to get the overall investor community interested in, all right, these guys are onto something. That allowed us to hire and develop a PR strategy to begin to tell the story. And so from that, this is a community that, if you're not watching this from Memphis, we know logistics, we know biotech, I think that's the right word, biomedical.
Yeah.
We know we have a pretty deep services industry, but we don't really talk about music tech or music today. We talk about the music history of the past that we should be building
right.
on. And so here I am, Black founder in Memphis, having a conversation about hip hop music, about Boosie Badass. And it's like, well, I don't even know who that person is, but tell me what does this mean? And as we're sharing it and telling the story that, look, the music industry is 25 cents of every dollar in streaming. The streaming business is Black music. Mm-hmm. That was a narrative that took time for everyone to understand, and then to start to recognize $3.8 billion is annually generated from hip hop and R&B music. Let's play to our strengths. We're losing population here that's having to choose Nashville, Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York for an opportunity when we should play to our strengths. And so I use our own story to talk about kind of a business that has high scale opportunity. We see exits in music usually, and valuations in music that are usually nine figures and sometimes greater. So if we can talk a little bit about high growth and scale businesses, and that there's still opportunity to have, I guess you could say, venture capital invested in, I would say, a lifestyle business. So it's not just an Uber or a Tidal Music. It can be a healthier alternative to foods and that sort of thing. Can we kind of talk about, how does that, is it continuum of types of businesses that are investable? It's not just I'm building the next Uber, or I'm building the next Tidal Music, or I'm building the next Connect Music. There's a wide band of what entrepreneurship looks like, and how do we get that support?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and thank you for leading the way in those music discussions, because I think there is a little bit of an emerging music tech ecosystem here, and I think it's a huge opportunity and something we definitely want to support and see the same opportunity that you do as well in Memphis. But I think when Epicenter started, we were defining entrepreneurship in that high growth, high tech, risky capital, venture capital, way. And so, and that had been the majority of our investment was in tech startups, in those areas of expertise in Memphis. And that's really important part of our ecosystem. But one of the things we did when we founded the organization was broaden that definition of entrepreneurship, like you just said. And so, in a market like Memphis that has a younger ecosystem and has such a creative population, where a lot of the entrepreneurial activity represents, the culture of the city, so food and music and art and artisan products, then that's not something we can ignore. That's a legitimate and investable piece of our entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so we really set out to broaden the definition of entrepreneur. And so we did some analysis sort of in the pandemic slowdown of what kinds of businesses were coming through our front door service, that intake process. And it really looks like three sort of different kinds of businesses. These are not like SBA, federal government definitions of businesses. This is just sort of what we saw in Memphis.
What you're seeing in the community.
This is like the Memphis community. And so the first is sort of a community or place-based business. These are businesses that are really vital to the culture and vibrancy of our neighborhoods and our community and our city. Those might be a micro business. It might be a solopreneur. It might be someone who wants to grow their business, or it might be someone who wants to maintain the health of a restaurant or a barbershop or other kind of business, or an artisan. And so,
Can you tell us, just as everyone's listening and hearing micro business? So if you're sitting at home and you have this idea, what fits in that micro business bucket?
Those are businesses with either no employees beyond the founder, or sort of under 5 employees is what I think. Again, it's not an official definition, but sort of
a
motivating. A handful.
There's something there. If you've got one person, one solo business, and you're solving a problem.
Right, or a business, or creating something, and maybe that business doesn't necessarily want to scale beyond that product or service that they're building. And those are vital to the culture. Yes. There are businesses that are what we would call traditional businesses that are maybe B2B, so business to business products or services. Those are typically economic drivers. They have the potential to scale and create jobs. Maybe they're looking for new customers or new contracts. Maybe they need a capital infusion to even get to a contract or completing RFP, or again, buy that piece of equipment, buy something to sort of get to that next milestone. And then, what we call innovative businesses. So these are businesses based on disruptive technology. We would put your business in that category. Of course, all businesses are sort of tech enabled now, especially after the pandemic, where folks have had to pivot to e-commerce and web sales and things like that. Then most businesses are tech enabled now, but we're talking about those that have the high potential to grow, scale, have a high rate of return, but are doing something disruptive in technology. And so those are kind of the 3 categories, but they're all really vital to our economy. They all deserve investment. The capital may look a little bit different. Angel investment is important in all of those. I know that's something we sort of touched on. But I mean, there's just the creativity here is wild.
So there are 3 parts: micro business, traditional.
Yes, so what we call traditional. These are just names that we've given.
These are for y'all that are watching. We say y'all, and we have our own plan for the segments of business. But the whole purpose for Conversations with CEOs is to encourage those who want to take that next step. I always hear people talk about side hustles. Well, it's a side hustle because you're not really willing to take the risk and make it your full-time work. And so I want to encourage those who are thinking about it. So there are three parts: a micro business, their creator or service a place-based business that does something in their local community, but is sustainable. The second is a traditional business, and so that might be something that we'd say maybe is not high growth. So I guess an example was, would it be a janitorial business?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it could be high growth, you know. Well, it kind of depends on what the goals of the founder are, and so maybe they want to scale across the United States. Maybe they open franchises. I mean, that's where everything starts to get really,
Because when we say, oh, well, you want to start a janitorial business, and I don't have the numbers, we may be able to pull the numbers up for ABM, for example, which is a global janitorial business. So if we look up ABM revenue, I'm curious to know that's a pretty substantial business. You think about companies, security companies.
Absolutely.
You see these companies grow.
We have the CEO of a security company on our board. So he's an entrepreneur. Yeah.
And so, the number is $6.5 billion business in janitorial, and would ordinarily say you may have some folks that might think it's not scalable. Well, it all depends on the founder, the vision. Is it to grow to 13 states for acquisition by a specific target? And then you have these high scale business, which we're all looking to scale and drive revenue and return to this capital stack, those early angel investors, the venture capital partners, the family foundations or family offices rather, that make an investment, and then of course the kind of out of town capital that we start to attract as we scale these businesses.
Exactly.
Hopefully to a significant level that we acquire more businesses or get acquired by a larger one, and so. That's the goal here, I think, when we talk capital. And so you kind of share with us the difference between, the high growth businesses and traditional and micro. So how important are both of those types of businesses to a community like Memphis? That's a majority minority city, significant. We've got significant work to do to tighten the wealth gap. And again, for those listening, there was the reflection of MLK 50 a few years ago. So I guess that was 2018. And one of the things that the local journalists had captured was that the growth of wealth in African American homes in Memphis was actually less than it was 50 years prior. And I think I said that right, don't quote me on it, but I'm close enough that we were going the wrong direction as a community. So how important is it to have these types of businesses that aren't just, high growth, next Ubers, next Titles, next Spotifys? How can those traditional and micro businesses alone do something to change the trajectory of Memphis?
Yeah, I think they're all important to our community, and I think entrepreneurship can be a pathway to individual, family, community wealth. And so it's about changing the narrative, and it's about putting stories of entrepreneurs from Memphis, Black entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, in the narrative and in the story, and showing what's possible. So I think, entrepreneurship can be a pathway to, you were talking about ownership, ownership of a business, again, creating individual and family wealth. I mean, it all contributes to our economy. And again, that's why it's so important that any entrepreneurial economic development initiatives reflect the demographics of our community. And so if we're not, prioritizing and providing access to resources for the majority of our community, we're going to fail. We're not going to grow. We're going to continue. We are growing, but we will fall backwards. And so, that has to be at the center of what we do. It's math. It's really economic math. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to repair, harm and break down barriers that have been put up intentionally or unintentionally. But in order to thrive as a community, as a majority Black city, we have to make sure that our efforts reflect that. And so all of those businesses are important, not only from an economic standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. The storytelling around those businesses is important. Connecting, you've participated in youth engagement events, showing the young people in Memphis the opportunity in entrepreneurship and showing them real entrepreneurs who are building businesses here. That starts at middle school. I have a middle school son myself, and you have to see that as an opportunity to even begin thinking about that. And so I think in general, the stories of Memphis entrepreneurs, we have our legacy heroes, but the stories of entrepreneurs that are building those businesses right now, part of our job is to elevate those stories and continue to tell them, because it's all important. So I think all of those kinds of businesses that you mentioned are important to changing the narrative, but changing the economic condition in Memphis and changing that for individuals and their families.
So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you've been so gracious to share with us. So I just want to close, I guess, with this one last piece, and you touched on it a little bit, that it's community culture, that, the guy or girl who aspires for music and says, well, I don't know how to do it. They can look and find Connect at the corner of 3rd and Vance, or BB King and Vance, right at MLK, so the corner of social justice and music.
It's an incredible geographic location you have here, yeah.
Well, especially when you have, lack of encouragement growing up, when your 5th grade teacher assured you that you'd be on the corner of 3rd and Vance, which was a very different reason for saying something like that, but I can't wait to see it.
You sure are, yeah.
So I think that collaborative culture, when you start to recognize that we're all in this thing together, and I was fortunate to serve on a committee and hear one of our senior executives share that. He said, I realized that my zip code wasn't safe if some of our most dangerous zip codes in the city or community weren't safe. And when he said that, so he realized I got to do more. And so with Epicenter, one of the things that I continue to be fascinated by is, during our time incubating there, it was a space where some of our most successful business owners came in. Yeah. They were relaxed, and even one came by my office, and I've heard about you. Yeah. And we had follow-up conversations, and as a supporter and advocate. And so this was a place where, a company that generated at the time a couple $100,000, and a guy who's managing $50 billion in assets, we get to have a conversation. And that follow-up conversation, and how do we collaborate, and how do we do more, and how do our goals as a business align with his own, I just want to see it happen. How did you guys foster that community, that collaborative culture with Epicenter, bridging entrepreneurship and those that are well-resourced in one space, in almost a disarming way? I don't know if that's really a question so much as it is just saying that's my experience, and really want to how do you build that? Is that just was it intentional? Did it just happen?
Well, first of all, it's a huge compliment, so thank you. I mean, that's the intent of that space, and so it's a huge compliment to hear that from you. I think it starts really the values that are at the heart of our organization, and then our team and myself embodying those values, so that sort of collaborative nature and welcoming everyone, and understanding that as the hub, we are a neutral actor that has a really big job and an important job to be a steward of our ecosystem and to be a voice of the entrepreneurs here, to advocate for them, to advocate for more resources. But we don't do anything alone. So I think part of what you felt is the fact that as a hub, we work with about 50 organizations, both in Memphis and regionally, to execute, anything. And so, and those come in and out at different points. But we work with, other entrepreneurial service organizations, the local, public entities like the city and the county, the state of Tennessee, academic institutions, and many others that create that ecosystem here. And we all have a role to play, but as a hub, we try to bring in more resources and activate all of those partners and collaborate with them. And so the intent for the space downtown is to be a convening space, a workspace. Again, it's been a challenge in the last couple of years to activate that, but I'm confident that it's sort of a rebuilding year for that.
Right.
So we're seeing more activity now that we have than we have in months. But we have new entrepreneurs coming in the space. But you're right, it's a collision point,
Right.
a good collision point.
I love that, collision point.
A collision point for
that.
investors,
Right.
for partners, those 50 partners that I mentioned. They're coming in and having meetings for our team, for youth entrepreneurs, and so it's a welcoming convening point for everyone, to highlight why entrepreneurship is so important in Memphis. And I will say just really quickly that was really important in the early months of the pandemic, that we had created that ecosystem, because we were all able to come together and share information and cross-refer businesses and kind of provide a safety net for a lot of our small businesses, and sort of navigate the relief funding and all of those
Right.
things that happened. Because we had already created those relationships. We trust each other. We work together on a daily basis. It's not easy. It's not linear. It's complicated to collaborate along other organizations with different visions and priorities, but it's our job, and it's really important to create that environment here.
Well, this is, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, yeah.
Spending time with us on Conversations with CEOs.
Yeah.
Again, Jessica Taveau, President and CEO of Epicenter Memphis. If you don't have an entrepreneurial creation center in your community, you should move to Memphis. And then you
right.
should partner with Epicenter
Yeah.
and launch your business. Thank you so much for your time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks
This
for
is
having
fantastic.
me. It was fun.
Thank you.
And thank you for all you're doing here in Memphis. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.